Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started. This is the February Kingfield Neighborhood Association meeting. As always, we are going to start with community forum, an opportunity for neighbors to talk about things that are happening in the community. As a reminder, board members are also neighbors and can speak during the community forum. Does anyone have any community forum conversations? Did we have anyone on Zoom that wanted to join? All right, seeing none, I will officially call the meeting to order and ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from last month's meeting, executive committee minute meetings, as well as the agenda for tonight's meeting. Can I get a second? Sure. All right, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you very much. We will jump right into the agenda, which starts with the MLK Master Park and Park dedication fees. Colleen Odell is here from the Parks Board to do a presentation on some conversations about MLK Park. So Colleen, come on up.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. How long, I just want to verify, hello there, me. I just, fuzzy me. I want to verify how much time you would like me to speak.
I would say 15-minute presentation, okay. And then the board touched on the subject and I think has questions and will have questions.
Great.
For another 15 or so.
Okay. I'm Colleen Odell. I'm a senior planner and landscape architect. I've been with the Park Board for about 10 years, and I've worked on or led the master planning efforts for all of Southwest Minneapolis parks, including MLK Park. So I'm now that it's been adopted, considered a plan champion. See my cape? With the idea being that I'm helping neighborhoods implement their priorities out of the plan and also just kind of sharing information. I will say this is I hope you can hear me with the mask on. This is the first in-person presentation I've done since pandemic started. So I'm a little rusty. Thanks. I was out for 9 months with long COVID. Just returned last month full time. So I am rusty. I also still have some cognitive issues. So if I'm tripping up, please figure pardon on that. Let's do it. Democracy in action. Okay. So I'm just going to cover a little bit, a reminder of what is in the Southwest Service Area Master Plan, which is this big dictionary tome here, and then that has MLK Park about 2/3 of the way through it. This is available online if you'd like to get it. Talk a little bit about park dedication basics, how projects are selected, either for park funding or for park dedication funding. And then where your current park dedication funding levels are and amendments. Can I ask, is anyone here familiar with park dedication funds? Like what kind of information? Okay, good. We'll start from zero. All right, there's the plan. If you haven't seen it in a while, this is a rather fuzzy depiction of it. It lists all the proposed design features, which are either changes to existing or brand new amenities, as well as existing features that are proposed to stay. And these master plans are planning out for 20 to 30 years. So taken together, it's the plan for the park. A lot of the elements are staying very much the same in this park, although there is on that, that'd be the western side, a few changes proposed. You want me to read through what those are? Okay. Okay, proposed design features. Number one, we're going to start at that end and move this way. Entry features with gardens and art, some naturalized areas, something called the Freedom Path with garden nodes and storytelling narrative.
What number is that? 3?
That would be 1,
There's
2,
1.
and 3 now.
2, 3.
So 3 is where the artwork is. The idea of a freedom path that continues to tell the story and weaves its way through the park. Sledding hill number 4. Number 5, meditation labyrinth. You need a little stick.
Yeah.
6 is the amphitheater. Proposed amphitheater. 7, naturalized planting pollinator garden.
Really?
Mhm.
Baseball field?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, that's 7.
wrong number. Don't look at them. I must have an old, this will be 7. Let's just change it up. 8, expanded picnic and grilling areas. Yeah, I don't remember about that. So we'll look at
Okay, right here.
9. Sorry about that.
9,
10/11, enhanced entry plazas.
Oh, here. The 2
11/12,
doorways.
13 would be the enhanced teen club house, community kitchen. I'm on the correct number.
Yeah.
14, bike playground and pump track. Which is now 15.
Oh.
I totally, I don't know where, who put this in here? I don't know where. 14. 14, skirt.
Yeah.
Got it. 16, full court basketball. 17, half court basketball. 18, multi-use fields. 19, public art on existing wall, that would be. Tennis courts with pickleball, 21. 22, there's 4 of them.
This looks like pickleball.
Right here, 22. And the naturalized areas, rain garden, this area. We're not touching that. Okay. In this master plan, if you want to take a look a little closer, it is online. These numbers did not turn out very well at this level of, you know what I'm saying? Yep, so those are 2020 estimated project costs for each one of those projects broken out. You had asked for an inflated cost adjustment. I don't have the brain to do that, but I did put what construction cost inflation rates were. You can see that post-pandemic that went from an average of like 1 to 5, it's jumped up to 20, and it's working its way back down. So it's not going to get back to those pre-pandemic cost numbers, but the inflation should come down and be a little more. So that'll give you an idea of how much things are going to cost. And there are some reasonably priced projects in here. Enhanced entry areas, 221,000 estimated. So if you want an idea of how far the funds might go, this on page 258.
So we like 4% in 2023 to those 2020 numbers, or
I think these are cumulative. Yeah, that's from the construction and financing management one. Okay.
sure the costs haven't gone down.
They've
Yeah.
they've gone down less quickly. Not a math major. Okay, so sir, is this focused on one?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a page from our website.
Is that better?
Yeah, oh, there we go. If you go to our website, you can access our capital improvement program, which we call the CIP, which is our 6-year plan of where funds are going to be spent, what projects are going to be implemented. And projects that make it into the CIP tend to be ones that are outlined in master plans. So that's why this list is going to be so important. How those park projects out of 160 plus parks make it into that 6-year projected CIP depends on an equity ranking. And MLK Park last year was number 62 out of 152 parks. If you haven't heard about our equity ranking system, it was the first one in the country that was used for allocation of funds in park systems. And it uses 7 community characteristics, level of percent of people living below the poverty line, percentage of children under 18, a number of characteristics for a neighborhood to determine where compared to the other neighborhoods it should be in priority for funding. There are some asset-based characteristics in there, which is why MLK is lower than you might expect it to be, because funds have been spent in this park in the last 5, 8 years or so. That brings it down, so that as you rise up, funds get spent, it knocks you to the bottom again. You rise up again. knocks you to the bottom. So that's why it's not quite as high as you'd expect it. That's why in the last 5 years, most of the parks that have been in the CIP have been north side parks, I think because of those community characteristics. And I did list over here just some of the previous projects, the new playground, pool upgrade, the sculpture move, the public art that wraps around that sculpture. Those are some of the investments that have been made.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
If the neighborhood opts to use park dedication fees and spend those, will that knock the ranking back? Again?
As far as I understand, and I will check with Adam on this, but my understanding is yes. So any investments, because if you think of neighborhoods in wealthier areas coming up with additional funds right and left, but still, if those didn't apply to their ranking, they would just rise up with no indication of the investment that's already happened there. Does that make sense? Looking at the reverse side of it. So I think the answer is yes. I have to double check that.
Okay,
Any other questions? So park dedication basics, in 2014, we worked with the city to pass the current ordinance between the park board and the city, so that all new developments are actually going to provide some sort of park dedication. And the ways that park dedication, anytime a new building is built or satisfied, are in this order. The developer can either donate land to the park board, they can pay a fee, or they can work with us on the provision of public land, private land for public use. The idea being that anytime you build a new residential complex or whatever, you're adding more people to the system. That means more people who need additional green space for recreation. So the more building happens in an area, the more that area has pressures on its parks and needs additional park recreation services. Yeah.
Do the neighborhoods get that money, depending on who's getting the most of the housing bill?
Correct.
Or does it just go to the whole fund to the whole city parks in general?
Good question. It must, if it's generated in your neighborhood boundaries, city neighborhood boundaries, it must be spent in those neighborhood boundaries.
Either how we rank in that?
Yes. Yes, and this is where to whip off the
Awesome.
thing and show you the information. I did want to tell you before I do that, we have a map online that shows you citywide what each neighborhood has accumulated in terms of money for its park dedication fees. Shows you on the map where, with dots, where those developments are, and whether the money from those developments has been allocated or not. And that's for the whole city. And I'll show you at the end how you can access that. There's some other information in here about that money comes to us monthly, so we try to update that regularly on our website. And as you had asked before, those fees have to be spent in the neighborhood. The other thing that's really important is that park dedication fees have to be spent on new construction or new improvements to existing. Because the idea is if you're building a new building, all these people are moving in, you can't just spruce up the thing you have for the same capacity. You need to add capacity, park capacity. So new elements or service expansion. So pickleball, you don't have pickleball at MLK right now. That's a new element. That's something you can spend park dedication fees on. And I had mentioned that it has to be in the master plan. So for project selection, it's not necessarily like NRP funds. It's not money that belongs to the neighborhood. It still has to be allocated by the park board of commissioners through vote. However, we do consult with neighborhoods and we ask that you write recommendations to us for your priorities on how to spend them. So that is what I'm hoping that this neighborhood organization is willing to do. If you want to do land in lieu, or a developer wants to do land in lieu, they can't just decide that. That has to be agreed upon by the park board of commissioners. And as I said before, whatever you're going to spend that on must be included somehow in the master plan. So to your question, Kingfield neighborhood levels, nice fuzzy map you've got here. This is the actual map that's on our website. And the link to that is up there. You have $316,442 last time I checked available to be spent, and you only have one park. You see the outlines of Kingfield here in blue. Each of these blue dots are the locations where developers have paid fees into that park dedication amount.
And how long? was spent? Oh, just to 2023?
Any money that has been collected since park dedication began in 2014 that has not yet been allocated.
Okay.
Once it's spent, the color of that dot will change.
But it jumped a lot because of the new larger developments.
I think looking at the other neighborhoods that you can see, it seems like we have a lot of new.
Have we spent this money?
Lindale neighborhood has about the same amount of money as you guys do. North Loop neighborhood had about $1 million. Yeah, exactly. But they also, other than the river, have no parks. So. I wanted to give you an example of what that recommendation from a neighborhood group looked like. This was an email that we got from the Stevens Square neighborhood folks. And I'll give you the link to this presentation if you'd like. You can see how they mentioned in here that they did a list of possible amenities like a garden space in a survey that they did for community outreach to ask their residents and citizens what they were interested in prioritizing. And after doing that engagement, to find out what folks wanted, this is the pieces on the master plan that they wanted to prioritize from the spending of their park. Urban agriculture being up there, and that's how they decided they wanted to do it. You had asked me to talk about how you do engagement for how to spend these funds. That's up to you. It's up to the neighborhood. We figure you know the folks here best. You had also asked about amendments to the master plan. I will just say, and I know Sarah was involved as well, it was a very thorough, long, engaged process to come up with that master plan. Amendments cannot be made easily. They can be made, but not easily. We spent many years pulling that together. We had a community advisory committee of about a dozen and a half people who held over a dozen public meetings to make the decisions for these plans. So they didn't come out of nowhere. And the idea is to balance what's happening throughout the entire Southwest area. So some places might have, for example, removed a ice skating rink. But that's because there were two right next to it. And we're trying to spread out our resources as fairly as we possibly can. So why would you do an amendment to the plan if there's something the community wants to see that's entirely new? It's not mentioned in the plan at all. And it wasn't considered during the master planning process. There are, for some of these parks, some very hotly contested issues. At Painter Park, not far away, there's a tennis court that someone had removed and replaced with basketball. That was very hotly contested down to the last minute when the board voted, it made a change. So if someone were to come back now and say, I want to do an amendment to put basketball in there, it had already been considered, deeply considered, and rejected by the board. So as long as this master plan is in effect, that's not going to be revisited. But a new idea is something that could be revisited with an amendment. It does require about a year of deep community engagement, neighborhoods in partnership with park staff. It will require public hearing and board vote. As I said, these plans are 20 to 30 year plans. This one was passed in 2020. So it will get a little rusty as it gets older. I could imagine more amendments coming as things change, but this so soon after it was adopted, trying to make amendments is going to be a little bit harder. Not impossible, but harder. Yeah.
So the line says first consider finding or intimate sale of amenities in the direction master plan. So it would would require them to move a future department.
Depending on what the move does to other things in the plan. So the plan is not very detailed. It's generally what amenities, generally where, generally how big. So if you're like, we want the amphitheater moved and it's not gonna bump anything else out, that's usually totally doable. But if you're moving that and then that causes the removal of the pickleball. Because each of those are a promise to some element of the community. And then the pickleball people are like, hey, that's your element. Any questions on that? Okay. You had asked me to talk a little bit about a timeline. That master plan is gonna be the guidance for all the Southwest parks for 20 to 30 years. Those park equity rankings are reassessed every year. So when money is spent, the next year it's gonna affect your number, your equity ranking. The CIP is always, as I said before, funding those parks at the top of the equity ranking, and the CIP looks 6 years ahead. So our current CIP looks to 2028. And you can go online and see where all of those allocations are. If you want to make recommendations on how to spend those park dedication funds, like 300,000, we would like to get some kind of email or letter from you by September, because our budget process happens in October and November. And we would like to get that into the next CIP so that we can allocate staff time to it and plan ahead for it. I don't think, based on your equity ranking, since we get up through about 20 parks a year, that MLK is going to come up. It depends on if things were to change with the data characteristics. I don't think it'll come up for at least another 3 years for park funding, separate from this park dedication fund. So this is going to be a nice way to bridge the gap in time and get some of these elements in.
So to clarify, in 3 years, possibly it would be in the CIP for 6 years out.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so 9 years. Right?
9 to 10 years.
And but the park dedication fees could be used.
Could be used right now, as soon as the board approves. And I will throw in the caveat that it always depends on staff availability. We've got 20 neighborhoods like yours right now who have enough money to build something like a football court, and we don't have 20 staff to do it. So we're trying to work through these as quickly as we can. That's why a recommendation from you is going to help, because it will get it into our process and allow us to assign staff to it. I did want to show you, this is kind of a little bit fuzzy, but this is the homepage, one of the homepages of our board website. And these red areas are where you're going to want to click if you want to look for the master plan or information on park dedication. So first you would choose park care and improvements, and then master plans and park dedication. Tons of information in there, including all the rankings and how we arrive at all those characteristics. If you're looking for information on the capital improvement program rankings, instead of park care, you go to About Us, and it's down here in the budget financial. That was it for me.
Question.
Yeah.
Neighborhoods get some, I would guess some of the money they're allocated depends on the population, just the number of people in a neighborhood. And
Yep.
if so, how do you account for neighborhoods that have really high rental or multi-unit housing?
I think the population is based on census information.
And so, and if you have a neighborhood that perhaps doesn't participate in the census, it's not how do you account for
It's
that?
quite possible. Well, that's why we have 7 different characteristics. We're trying to balance those out, and 4 of those are community based. So poverty level, children under 18. I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head. 3 of them are asset based. So how old is all this stuff in the park? When was the last time it was fixed? How much money was spent? How recently there? 3rd one that I can't remember. Sorry. So we try to, adjust for that, but it's an imperfect system. We're trying to improve it.
No, I'm just saying if neighborhoods.
Thank you.
have, You know, have
Census
population comes and goes, and moves a lot. And then you have to
And then
count it in the.
for argument's sake,
Yes.
say a community said, our park's great. We want to give this to another neighborhood or another park, could they?
According to the ordinance now, no, because it must be spent in the neighborhood in which it was generated. And I'll tell you that nationwide, park dedication ordinances are challenged all the time by developers who don't want to pay the fees. And so sticking to the letter of the law as it is pretty important for us. We keep it very clean. We don't want any reason for a challenge.
What about neighborhoods who don't get that kind of build, like the one building we've had in the last few years, it's like a lot. And there's plenty of neighborhoods.
Because they haven't had investment, they will come up the equity rankings more quickly and they'll get money from net debt bonds and other park sourcing.
So business, if you're opening a business, do you also have to kick into that, or is it only
Yep,
residential?
no, it's commercial as well, but the numbers are a little bit different. In terms of what-
Is it development of new commercial spaces, not filling vacant storefronts?
No, I believe it's new development, so you're
Yeah.
bringing new people to the area, whether that's commercial or residential.
What's the process? We send a letter, we have an opinion, we do our research, then what happens?
So you do some engagement, you tell us what you think your priorities are, you send them into us before September. And then our planning staff will look at getting that into the CIP, then you'll know what date that money is earmarked to be spent, because that's when staff are available to help you work on that project. And in the meantime, leading up to that, we can continue conversations to get it prepped and set up and ready for that project to take off.
So the following year. For 6 years.
6 years is for the non-park, park,
Yes.
it's other funds.
Whatever they do.
Process your whole funds, say, it's just the timeline's different, right? So we'd still be submitting this. If we were gonna use our dedication fees or if we were gonna seek the CIP funds, it'd still be engaging in the same process.
Kind of, CIP funds, because they're based on those 7 characteristics, aren't really open to suggestions. Park dedication funds are. That's why we went the high.
So, yeah, so let's say the project, you're like, yeah, thank you, community, for finding this project. In that, if we're to spend this, 300,000. Typically, does that project happen in 1, 2, 3, or 4? And you guys, yeah, let's do it.
The CIP and budget would be adopted in fall of this year. They're not gonna kick in until the next year. The odds of it getting in the very next year, possible, but we already have staff that are trying to finish up projects from the first previous year.
Only so we can.
So probably a couple years at the earliest.
Cool.
So it would start, earliest I could imagine it starting would be 2025.
That's-
Does that make sense? With park dedication,
And those fees are solely from businesses or.
Development.
Building, kicking in.
new development, yep. The public funds, the net debt bonds and everything else,
Yeah.
that's the rest of the CIP based on the equity benefits.
Another question that I'm sure is it always varies. So we have Spark Equity ranking every couple of years to rise to the top. Then we allocate this capital improvement for 6 years out and start park planning projects. And you do it for the top 20 parks. Do you typically, are you able to take a big bite out of the park plan, like half of the projects, or is it like you're only doing two?
Well, these are 20 to 30-year plans, so probably not half of the projects.
Sure.
We got 20, 30 years to do them. But when we started this program, we were doing smaller allocations and realized it was really important to do bigger allocations so that we could get some of these bigger pieces done. So yeah, I've seen some pretty sort of dramatic improvements in some parks.
Do you come up in the, so I guess that's, you do 20 into 156, you come up every, 6 to 8 years?
We get through about 20 a year. So if you can do the math, it's too late for me this day to do it right.
160 parks, 150.
163, 64. Yeah. And this,
But the time we're actually not operating here.
if all things remain equal statistically over the next however many,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if your population suddenly changed dramatically, or a tornado, knock on wood, came through and damaged things, that would change your.
In the Stevens Square example, they had a list of like, these are our top priorities. But there were still 4 or 5 on that list. What did it happen?
We're in the middle of getting them ready to implement the urban agriculture. That one, some projects are a little easier to implement because the urban agriculture isn't so much a construction project as sort of a legal agreement coordination project. We now have a community garden coordinator, so she's able to get that started more quickly than something like a new.
Weird question,
Bring it on.
because I'm curious and you may not know, but that, there's a little pool by Lindell, Lindell Community School. Is that part of the park board? I'm assuming it's not a school board, like, is that something the park board runs? I've never seen just like a random pool without.
Yes, that is the Lindell School Pool. It's school land. Park board amenity managed by us, and in the master plan, it's called to be taken out, to be removed. Because the school really didn't want it being a attractive nuisance during school hours.
And that's up in a year. I
That's
think.
coming up, that was
Yeah.
put in the CIP and that's,
And they're building a giant splash pad.
so sort of rearranging where the water
I
amenities. come from.
just wanted to have, I could just go there, I've never seen you get off.
That was also a fairly, well-loved amenities by certain people who really didn't want to see it go, so that was contested.
Other questions?
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. There's a lot of details. Feel free to reach out to me at any time or Adam.
I have one question based on scale of things in the plan. So it says like entry garden. Do we know the calculation for the number of square feet? Does that
No.
include only plants or is there art also included or welcome signage, the amphitheater size, materials? Like, how do we get that detail of what went into those numbers?
In general, master plans didn't have that level of detail. Though they did allocate general square footage in order to come up with calculations. So if that's something you're interested in, we can find that for you. But when you look at implementing any of these, as long as they're not wiping something else off, I think you've got flexibility in terms of size and what goes into it. You can also think of it in phases. So if you have a limited amount of money, get the amphitheater in, think of signage as phase 2. So it doesn't have to stop just with that one piece.
And if the neighborhood association had funds that they wanted to partner in with that, is there an easier way to spend that? Like, if they put it in plantings, are there less restrictions than there are in like hardscape or?
Yes. Plantings, signage, anytime you're digging in the ground or you're putting in a hard infrastructure, there's gonna be procurement considerations, insurance considerations, union work considerations, all of those things. I think if you are working with softscape things like plantings, that's gonna be a lot easier for us to.
And does it get messier if neighborhood dollars are mixed with park dollars?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can either write us a check. Or,
Do people do that?
oh yeah, we do. Or we can operate them as 2 separate but concurrent projects.
Okay.
Yep.
And if have park dedication fees ever been used as match for grant funding?
That's a good question. That's an Adam question. I don't know. I think it might be tricky. Just because of how the board has to approve it and will the timing work with the grant and all this other stuff, but I don't see why not. It's Adam. Adam is director of strategic planning, so he's my supervisor.
Is there any other parks that have an actual pool,
An actual pool?
like a real size swimming, not just the.
Yeah, the natural.
Oh, those are all from the athlete?
We can,
Put a pool in it, right?
The Phillips
That was
pool.
it.
Phillips just built one.
Phillips is a full deck pool. It's indoors.
Jim, look here. Is it for these? We pay for it, right?
You know,
That's proposed or that's built.
it's,
It's already built. There's a, we own it. Yeah,
We're gonna get named Jim.
donations. Before we change the naming policy.
Why do you want to call it Denkowski's?
I don't know.
Stephen Square, what's it, Bryan Square, that's small and clear.
Oh, it's-
So that's an idea of a smaller scale one, so the draft, which is larger.
Powderhorn has a small one. Sort of. A performing space.
That's been a big ask in the new master plans, I think. That, pickleball came out of nowhere, skate parks. Those are all asks that a lot of places already have.
it's the, I know that it doesn't. At what point do it, so like, by where it's pickleball, courts are, there's that really awesome tree. At what point do we start looking at where things go?
When the money is allocated and a staff's assigned. So they run a survey, and anytime there's a tree, we're always working with our foresters.
Yeah.
Who definitely get a say on whether, I mean, when the playground went in, there's that big tree in the middle of the park.
Yeah.
That was with the design plan to come out, and the forester came and said, absolutely not, just stay, so that's why we have that going on.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's good. So, there's some negotiation. there. Plus, we have to find out what's underground. I mean,
Sure.
some of these, I mean, the park board's been around for 130 years. We don't always know what's under. We can start digging and find old structures. Whatever.
What if we overspend?
You do.
Taxpayer.
You personally.
But you wouldn't overspend because the project would be implemented by a staff.
I was just gonna ask, are the renderings of the figures in the master plan?
Possibly, there might have been one for. Yeah, go take a look at Bryan Square, Loring Park, but that's a different master plan, it's not this one. So the entire city now, we did a 5-year blitz and have master plan the entire city. So this is one of 5 such documents, and you should be able to go through and look at renderings for all of them. You know, a good Google search will give you lots of good ideas as well. I mean, how it's gonna look specifically, it's really open. When these do get a staff assigned, and we started, there's a whole nother round of engagement that. Again. So what do you really want it to look like? Those questions. The other thing I was gonna say, when you consider doing engagement, Park Board recently had worked very closely with the Legacy Council. With the pandemic, been very out of touch, not sure how active they are anymore. I know a lot of their members were older, but that would be an important group to make sure that you're connected with on any engagement.
Yes, and they were invited here this evening.
Okay.
Those that we could find, and you know, we have a new park director at King.
Oh, who's it?
Aaron.
She might be making that up.
No, it's Aaron.
No, they do move them around, so.
Flanders?
Oh, yes, okay. Flanders. I know the last name, Brian Flanders. No. Yeah, so I would be happy to also meet with them and talk about what's in the plan.
Great.
They may not be. Yeah. The other thing I do want to mention is we are about to launch a public, dashboard, I guess, where all of the plan champions are tracking what's getting implemented from these plans, so that they aren't just sitting on the shelf. So you will soon be able to look on there and find out what we're actively working on, what's kind of on hold, et cetera, and how many of the elements have been implemented.